Welcome guys. As you know, my name is Martin Jones and this is P2 Corporate Reporting. I am coming to you from the wonderful world of Interactive, London School of Business and Finance here in London, in Holborn, London, and this is our Interactive brand, and through this Interactive brand you and I are going to interact, but there's also going to be a lot of teaching, and I am going to teach you corporate reporting. I am of course partway through this process and I have a slide just about to appear over my shoulder to prove the fact. I'm just going to go mini me now by pressing the magic number 2. There we go. Sucks me down into the corner, and over my left shoulder I have a slide proving who I am and what I'm going to do. P2 Corporate Reporting, ACCA P2 Corporate Reporting, and we have 2 hours together to work our way through the 4th of 8 sessions. I'm very fond actually of starting at the beginning each time. I feel that works for me, so that's what I do. So I'm going to take you through the slides that you have in fact seen already. I'm going to remind you that in session 1 we did some basic groups with the fabulous question, pedal, saddle, handlebar. That's in the bag. We then stayed with basic groups and did the extremely complex basic component called changes in ownership and slotted complex group structures on at the end of the second evening. And then last time I saw you we did foreign currency, but you might recall that foreign currency didn't actually take the whole 2 hours. It left me with half an hour at the end to start cash flow statements, and that was very relevant in the context of tonight because that is our process tonight. Looks like it'll be a double header, 1 hour, 1 hour, but it doesn't quite work like that. Might do, but it's more likely to be sort of 1 hour and 10 and 50 minutes, probably about that. I have a very simple agenda for cash flow statements. The simple agenda is to do the question ducky with you. If you look right on the far side, you'll see there's a homework question described as Squire. In fact, I actually set those homework last week. But if you didn't get to do it last week, it remains homework this week. What we did last week in class together is we worked cash flow workings. Do you remember we worked cash flow workings? And now we're going to apply that to a real question. And of course I've got it here. I like having paper. You can probably hear that paper landing on the desk there. And in there I have the question ducky. I'm going to do it with you. Of course I also have a PDF here on my screen waiting for us to flick through as well. So I've got a virtual copy as well as a real copy. And as I say, it'll be about an hour and 10, hour and 15 maybe on ducky. We'll see how that gets on. And with the remainder of the evening, I become a salesman and I try and sell you current issues. That's it. That's it. Actually, no, it isn't. There's a little sandwich in between, which I've been saving for now. I haven't told you as yet how the P2 exam is constructed, how it's put together by the examiner, and that's because I've been saving it for this session. Once we've done a cash flow statement, I'll be able to talk to you constructively about question 1 and give you a feel for question 2, 3 and 4. And actually 4 is current issues, and that works quite well, you know, when we pass from question 1 to question 4. So chapter 4 and chapter 5, between there we're going to slot in 5 minutes, probably, good 5 minutes, talking about how the exam is constructed by your examiner. So that is your future. I'm just going to look to my left hand side now and have a look at myself and admire myself looking tiny, actually, smaller than usual. Why is that? I have a very, very tiny camera in front of me and it seems to be giving a tiny mini-me. But that works okay. You can still see me. I can still see that you can see me. I will introduce my world to you. You can guess I'm looking to my left at myself, but I'll tell you what I have here. I've got a camera in front of me. I've got my Wacom. It's called my righty screen with a pen just here for me to write on. I've got my paper version of my class notes in front of me. I've got a keyboard here. I've got lights all around. These walls that look white to you, they are white. They really are white. and I have a screen over here on the left hand side where I can see myself delayed a few seconds, which is very, very encouraging, because the little mini me that I have on the screen just here is actually coming to me via the internet. So what's happening is I'm being recorded by a program called, but it's very complicated, I'm being recorded by a program called XSplit, and being, streamed via a program called Livestream, and going through Livestream's computers, coming out and via the internet coming to that fella over there. So the fact that there is very little delay, I can actually see myself doing the geography of the studio just now, and the delay is really short. That was true last Thursday as well, wasn't it? I had a bit more. I'm online at least twice a week, and I was online on Tuesday afternoon. On Tuesday afternoon, I did actually have a little bit of a delay. It seemed to be working okay. Actually, it seemed to be very stable, but with a bit of delay. But last week, when you and I were together, we also had a really, really quick internet, didn't we? But that did cause some problem to some guys. Some guys had fabulous internet, and some guys not so good. Well, if you guys are having a not so good time with your internet, you have my sympathy, as I might have recorded to Interactive before. I live in central London, and my internet is like third world quality. It really is. That's just the way it is for me. Okay, so I can see some highs, and I'm going to say some highs to those guys. So, Keisha, I can see you're here again. Welcome back. You were here, of course, on Tuesday. Nenaj, you're back again from Tuesday as well. And I've got all sorts of other guys. I've got Ahmed, I've got Ayan, I've got Bixum. I've got 19 viewers, so I've got some quiet guys in the background watching but not chatting. Welcome all. Welcome all. Let's get on with this. So what I'll do first actually is I'll open up my paper, which will guide me to my PDF. Just check that's on silent. Yeah, it's always on silent. It's my phone down there. I like to have it because I can use it as a calculator. Whoa! Goodness me. My class notes have just opened a question ducky, so you can tell what I was doing on Tuesday. Page 68 is question ducky. And it's going to appear just over my shoulder. Here we go. Pacha! There we go. And how's that looking? There we go. Actually, not exactly how I like it, so I'll just sort that out a little bit. My pen's got pressure sensitivity. Oh, that's much better. Do excuse me scribbling all over the notes. So you can see this is the notes, a PDF version of the notes. And the particular program that I have here is a bit clumsy as it goes to the page. I can see I'm going to need to go to page 68, but it's not going to be very pleasant as I flick down. There's nothing I can do about that. You just have to bear with me as it sort of makes you a bit seasick as it goes past you. It's quite disgusting, isn't it? I'm just looking down at the page number to find it. There isn't another way of doing it as far as I can figure out. There you go. Oh, it's actually saved my markings from Tuesday, so we do need to get rid of those. I think that's my fault actually. I think I saved it. One of markings, that's very distracting. Let's get rid of the ones from, oh, there's loads, aren't there? Let's get rid of all, that's very distracting. You can see what we're going to do, lots of ticky. Well, perhaps that's a good thing, to be able to see what we're going to do. How's that looking now? So there's Ducky, there's the title there on page 68, and we're going to do a cash flow statement. I did a little experiment with the presentation of the cash flow statement on Tuesday, and I wasn't completely convinced it worked 100% for me. So, wow, look at all that colour. Flipping heck, I better get rid of that. That's very distracting, isn't it? You can see what we're going to do though. It's quite cute in a way. You can see we will have ticks all over our answer in the way that the Tuesday guys did as well. I just happen to, be on the requirement page. So shall we start with the requirement page? So here we go. Starting with the requirement, you can see what the requirement is. It's asking for a group cash flow statement using the indirect method, which is the one that starts with profit. And it's 35 marks and, off we go. So the first thing to do is to learn the pro forma. I have a blank journal just over my shoulder. Pacha! There you go. You can see that appearing over my shoulder. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up 2 blank pages. It doesn't work enormously well with this program. This program you might recognize as being closely related to Windows Journal, but Windows Journal is a very big program and a little bit unstable in a studio environment. So this is a copycat program called Journal, and Journal is not quite so good with presentation of 2 pages at once, because what I want to do is I want to get myself 2 pages. Now you can just about see in a sort of ugly way that I've got 2 pages over my shoulder, but I've actually got mine like that, which works okay for me as a lecturer, but it's not really what you want. What you want is you want 2 pages side by side. By the way, if you've got a book, I don't know if I've got a book around here, but if you're working in a notebook, then you need to open up your notebook and have 2 sides with the spine down the middle and both sides are blank, okay? So you need 2 sides of blankness. And what you're going to do with those 2 sides is you're going to strike a line down each of them like this. I never liked the idea of over encouraging you to fuss about. So, it doesn't need to be a straight line as long as it looks all right. As long as you've got reasonably straight hands, you can do it like that. There you go, that's perfect, that's fine. So if it looks a bit drunken to you, it's still absolutely fine. That's perfectly acceptable. And then do exactly the same thing down here. So you've got 2 lines like this. It was a bit drunken, that, wasn't it? So there you go, that's probably better on the second page. And what you do on the second page is you divide the second page again by having 2 crossbars. You probably can't quite see exactly what I'm doing here, unfortunately, because of the nature of this program, but if I make it even smaller again and add another page, it seems I've got to do that. It's quite difficult for you to see, but that's the second page there, just at the top. And what's going to happen is I'm going to, let's use something that really stands out, pink really stands out. I'm going to slot a working in here, a working in there, a working in there, a working in there, a working in there, and a working in there. So over my shoulder here, I will have space, I do have space for 6 workings. Now, actually, your examiner is unlikely to have 6 workings. He might have 4, he might have 5, he might have 6. If he has 6, you have space for 6 workings, but you probably won't need all of them. So you have your workings on 1 page, your cash flow workings on 1 page. There we go, just get rid of that. And you're going to have your cash flow statement on the first page, fairly obviously. And also I'm going to give you a bit of a in order to highlight that that's going to be the CFS, okay, and the workings just at the bottom of the page there, all right? So I'll get rid of those W's because we're thinking about the first page. What's actually going to happen is I'm going to do what's called the operating section. On the left-hand side, I'm going to do the investing section and the financing section on the right-hand side, okay? And that's how the CFS is going to work out. It's kind of like having 2 pages on 1 page. This, if I can just show you this way around, operating and investing and financing all on 1 page. Works really neatly and it stops you from being overwhelmed by information. It's a really nice trick. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write the title, I think. I'm going to write the title. I better change the scale, otherwise we're all going to get completely squiffy trying to look at those tiny pages. So I'm going to write the title to the question. So the question, of course, is Ducky. So the question is, actually that's a bit lopsided. The camera's a bit, well, you can't tell, but the camera's a bit, so I've got to really shunt my notes to one side. I hope I don't lose a mouse. I've just got a mouse there. In danger of losing the poor fella. So I'm just going to push that right off the edge. Okay, that's better. I'm a bit more straight now. I'm very right-handed. I like to have my screen over here. Not over here, but over here. So anyway, there we go. I'm sorted now. Ducky. So the question's called Ducky, and of course this is the CFS, and that will do you, something like that as a title. And what a CFS starts with is with the profit before tax. And what I do is I go to the question on page 69 and I pick up the PBT. I'm going to copy it off my paper. Can you see 866? You go 866 and you're off. Well done, you're now doing a cash flow statement. So I'm going to show you how to continue from here by flicking to the question. So I'm going to flick to the question now. There you go, there's the question, up to the P&L. And we're going to do what's called the profit reversal. What we're going to do, which is counterintuitive, is we're going to start with the 866 and work our way up to the 790 by reversing upwards in the order 1, 2, 3 as numbered here. 1, 2, 3. So reversing up the P&L. So this profit reversal, we reverse up the P&L, copying the information and reversing the sign. I'll show you now. Can you see that minus 45? It becomes plus 45 as we reverse upwards. Plus 23 becomes minus 23 as we reverse upwards. Then associate is 98 plus, and we make it 98 minus, and then the strangest thing of all, we work out the operating profit. By grabbing a calculator, I'm going to grab my ancient Casio calculator. I'd love to know how old this is and when I bought it. I started accounting in 1990. I signed my contract on the 31st of August 1990. And I was doing physics at university before that, and presumably this would be too simple a calculator for me to do physics with. But I think this is a calculator for my first year as an accountant. So it's 25 years old, this calculator. It's a beautiful piece of work. So we're going to work our way down. 866 plus 45 minus 23 minus 98 gives us 790, which looks a bit daft because the figure of 790 is in the question. But what you then do is you agree the figure that you get in your calculator with Graham Holt's figure in his question to make sure you have the same thing. Because what you have done is very strange, but it also is, it's very easy, it's strange, and it's easy to get wrong, I would suggest, because it is so weird. And there are 1, 2, 3 marks for that. You get those 3 marks, all you need is another 47 and you're finished. That's the only bit of the cash flow statement that changes from question to question. It doesn't change much, but this thing called the profit reversal changes very slightly from question to question. The rest of the pro forma is indeed formulated and doesn't change from question to question. The rest continues with the operating profit reconciliation, which has 3 blocks of 3. The first block of 3 is working capital, as you can see. I'm just a bit nervous of knocking over my tea, so I'll get some benefit out of that before I knock it over. Oh. Just just managed to spill some water on my notes. Well, that's not the end of the world, is it? I think what I'll do is I'll put my tea down here on the second level so I can't knock it over and it isn't in frame. Now, the working for the inventory, receivables and payables goes opening minus closing plus acquisition, like that. And that's a standardized working. You can probably barely see that, but that's opening minus closing plus acquisition. And those are standard 3 workings that start off your operating profit reconciliation. The next 3 are 3 non-current asset elements. Depreciation, disposal and impairment, and the next 3 are dunno what, dunno what, dunno what. So we leave 3 blanks. 1, 2, 3, which brings us to CGFO, cash generated from operations. And it's a bit of a squeeze, so I'm going to go for cash generated from ops. Then below that is interest paid. Which also has a standard working. It's very similar to inventory, but slightly different. It's opening minus closing plus P&L charge. Okay, opening minus closing plus P&L charge. And then we have tax paid, which as you saw last week, I think, if I did that with you, tax paid can get quite complicated. And well, you'll see in a moment what happens in tax paid. Both of those, both interest paid and tax paid, are paid, and therefore the cash flows out. So we stick them in a bracket, stick them in a sausage. We fry them in a sausage, as I say. And that gives you what's called the operating cash flow, and then that number is repeated at the top. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll write it and then I'll go out a little bit. So I'm going to go back up to the top. How do we do that? Shunt up here. So we go operating cash flow studio lights are blinding me a little bit, but yes, I can see that looks okay. And then I'll come out a bit so you can see it. Maybe I went a bit far there, but this information here is slotted up there. Okay? When we get there. So back in again. There we go. And we have investing. The examiner goes a bit crazy with investing. So in preparation for the winter's examination, we're going to leave 12 lines. Read them and weep, 12 lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then financing, that's cute. It just happens to fit in on this particular screen, the way I've done that. Financing is then 8 lines. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. And then at the bottom we have cash flow between opening and closing. And that's your pro forma. I'll just let you get that at the bottom, and then I'll come back out again and show you the pro forma again, including also the workings. So let me come out so you can see this. Puja, puja, puja. So I've gone really hyper small now. You can see there's the cash flow statement right in the middle there. How's that look to you? Look, it looks all right, a bit of grey on either side, but it looks quite cool. And if I just bring that up a little bit, you can see there's my second page for the workings. Now, what you would do in the exam is you just let your workings happen to you, but I'm going to force the issue slightly in this case, because you're just getting used to the process, which is incredibly methodical and mechanical, but does take a bit of getting used to. So I'm going to flip across to the notes now, and I think I'll just get rid of that colour because it might distract me later. And I'll come across here. As you were seeing from the ticks that we had from Tuesday on this fella, what we're going to do is we're going to tick our way through the information. So we're going to tick the 92 and tick the 78. Why are we doing the 92 first? Because it happens to come first. Why are we going to do goodwill first? Because it happens to be first. So you can see that this question has got the order goodwill, tangible, associate. But if it had been the reverse order, I would have just dealt with things in the order that they come to me. So because this question goes goodwill, tangible, associate, my workings are going to go goodwill, tangible, associate. It's really small, so I'll just come in a bit. Not much though. So my first working is going to be goodwill, then tangible, then associate. Great. And then off we go. We just start ticking through the numbers, starting with goodwill. So just as I was saying just a moment ago, in fact, if you can see the ticks there, the first number I'm going to tick, I might as well tick it again for fun. We're going to tick the 92 and then tick the 78 and just copy the information in. So let's do it. So writing it out in full, opening, closing. I used to have 92, I now have 78. And I am going slightly squiffy, trying to look at that tiny writing. So let's come back in again to full scale. There it is. So I used to have 92. I now have 78. Opening raw, closing sausage. So the opening balance is positive, the closing balance is negative. And I just go for opening raw, closing sausage, because that looks like it's frying in a sausage to me. When I say that, I mean that it looks like it's frying in a sausage. So opening raw, closing sausage, and we just carry on like that, just copying the information from the question. So tangibles is next. I'll take it from my paper copy here on the left. I used to have 1, 2, 4, 8, and I now have 2, 4, 7, 3. Opening raw, closing sausage. That's the end of my tea, and it's only 7 o'clock. I'm in trouble, aren't I? So 1, 2, 4, 8, 2, 4, 7, 3. The associate is next. We used to have 550, we now have 545, opening raw, closing sausage. Looking cool. That's it, that's all you do. Then down onto the next couple of lines. So I'll flick to the question so we can do some ticky, make you feel comfortable. So we've dealt with the 92, we dealt with the 78, we dealt with the 1248, we dealt with the 2473, we dealt with the 550, dealt with the 545, so we just go to the 622 and the 734 and we just carry on like that. So back to the answer. You just learn where this stuff goes just by repetition. You know, I'm not using anything clever here, it's just I've been doing it since, when did I say again? Since 1990. So, you know, not surprisingly, I know where this stuff goes now. There's no brain power here, it's just, you know, animalistic. It's like Pavlov's dogs. I need to research that to know what I'm actually saying there. But it's just like, you know, animalistic. You just practice these questions till you know where stuff goes. I used to have 622 and 734. And I used to have 601, and now I have 689 in receivables. And for cash and cash equivalents, I used to have 205 and now 57. So you learn that this goes here, 205 and 57. Oh, I remember what I did on Tuesday. I changed colour. I might give that a try. Back to the class notes. Let's just tick through. So we've got that baby in. This one too. And we're going to carry on down. I'll just tell you where we're going next. Where we're going next is down to this 60 and 100. We just carry on down the balance sheet, right? But before we go there is actually one extra mark that we haven't picked up yet. Because we can see that the cash outflow is 148, worked out as a balancing figure. We can actually score 2 marks for this. There's 1 mark for the pair of 205 and 57, but there's 1 more mark for the cash flow itself. At least that's what the examiner usually does. The only real consistency with this examiner is his inconsistency, but usually that would be 2 marks. Then, as promised, we drop down to the shares, and you can see the shares has gone up. The share capital has gone up. That's because of a share issue. That goes into financing. And I'm going to do an informal working to work out the difference of 40. So the nominal has increased by 40. Can you see the premium? The premium has increased by 110. Which gives us, what's that, 40, 110, 150. So I'm informally working out the cash flow from the share issue as 150, and there's 1 mark for that. Then you always ignore the reserves. I'll make a note of that on the face of the question. You always ignore the reserves. So we've picked up the 60 and the 100, the 75 and the 185, but you always ignore these 2 babies here. These 2 as a collective, they're called reserves. And you always ignore the pair, the 4 numbers in other words. Like that. Okay, which means that the next pair of numbers will be the NCI, and you drop that into a working. So we drop the NCI into a working. Oops, into a working. NCI. I used to have NCI of 107. I now have NCI of 157, opening roll, closing sausage. And then I drop down to tax, deferred tax. Now tax has got a particular element of pro forma, which is as follows. First we have the doubling up for current tax and deferred tax. Then we have the doubling up on the SPLOCI, the statement of profit or loss, and other comprehensive income. Now this is a fabulous question from your current examiner, but it is, as you can see, from 2000. So although it is a question from your current examiner, it doesn't have any NCI. It predates the OCI. Do apologise, I said that wrong first time. It does have NCI, it doesn't have OCI. That's hard to say. It doesn't have any OCI, so that's not applicable in this case, but it will be in the summer. Sorry, in the winter. In the winter, let's get my seasons right. But otherwise, this is a fabulous question. I'll talk about how this question is kind of a step towards the exam question that we're going to practice on revision. As we get towards the end of the answer. But what we have been given is been given deferred tax, which is we used to have 417, and we now have 390, opening raw, closing sausage, like that. Then redeemable preference shares, we're informally going to work out how much cash we have paid to pay off the prefs. So we can have some sort of title like pref repayment or whatever you want to call it. And there's nothing formal about my calculation of the 30, nothing formal about the way I'm collecting this data. I'm just working out the 30 as quickly as possible. There's a mark for the 30, but no mark for working. I just want to get it quickly. The prefs have gone down because cash has flowed out to pay them off. And it's the same but the other way around with the loans. That's just a loan issue. And it's the same idea here. I'm just trying to get an informal working. To get me the figure of 435 as quickly as possible, and it is 1 mark for the 435. Okay, so now I'm at the bottom of the balance sheet looking at the current liabilities, and I don't know enough about the detail inside the current liabilities to split it out, so I'll have to wait. So let's go back to the question, and we restart the question on the P&L. So on the P&L, what we do is we start again at the profit from operations, the operating profit, or in fact what we do is we start ticking through these fellas just below operating profit. So income from associates. So that's going to make the associates bigger. The income from associates is actually the share of the associates' profit. So what happens to an entity when it makes a profit? Of course, what happens is it gets bigger. So each time what we're going to do is ask ourselves the question, what does this do to that? When an entity makes a profit, it grows, it gets bigger, so it's positive, it's up. Then we carry on with the 23. We're not quite sure what's going on with the 23, but we're going to make an educated guess. The interest income we're going to assume is all interest received. Interest received doesn't have a stable resting place, but it usually goes into investing. And the interest received is 23 flowing in. The next one is interest expense. That definitely does have a particular place it goes. It goes there. So let's drop it in. So that's 45. Okie doke. And then tax, the tax charge goes into the tax working. So the tax workings there, I'll just bring that up so you can see the title. And what does the tax charge do to the tax liability? The current tax charge into the P&L makes the liability bigger. And the same is true for an OCI charge, although there isn't an OCI charge in this question because it predates the OCI. Then right down at the bottom you've got who sits between Pat and Pam. Who sits between Pat and Pam? Hello girls, NCI. And the NCI is up there. So P&L 69, yep, that's good. And of course the NCI, taking NCI makes the NCI bigger. Then we have the SOCI, Statement of Changes in Equity. A SOCI is a thing that you are expected to produce at F7, but you're not doing F7, you're doing P2. Here you're just expected to use it to interpret it. I'll just tick off the tax and tick off the NCI, and then what we'll do is we'll focus our minds on the total column. What we want is information from the total column. In particular, we want the dividends paid of 78, and off we go. So dividends paid has a particular place to go. It goes into financing. So dividends paid. Uh, 78. Sausage, like so. Dividends paid. 78 sausage. Yep. And then you can, if you want to, accommodate the other stuff in the SOCI. In the SOCI, yeah, we haven't looked at the fact it's called a SOCI. So we will do that briefly. So it's called a SOCI because it's a, where is it now? Statement of changes in equity. There you go, statement of changes in equity. SOCI. And as you can see in the SOCI, we've got 78 for the dividends. But we also have, a bit old-fashioned that, isn't it? Surplus on revaluation, a revaluation gain of 80 and an exchange difference on the foreign associate of 13 and a sausage. So we're going to bring those two further pieces of information into the mix. Okay, so revaluation first. The revaluation happens on the PPA, the tangible non-current assets. So we have a revaluation gain using the modern language, 80, and of course a revaluation gain makes tangibles go up. And we also have a forex loss. Actually, I'm going to put the fact where we got that from the SOCI there, just to help you find that at the weekend. And the same with the associate down here. I'm going to have, what was the figure again? 13 exchange, forex. So it's foreign exchange, forex, FX if you like. And that too is coming from the SOCI. It's a figure of 13, and it's got a sausage around it in the SOCI, so that means it's a loss. What happens to an entity when it makes a loss? It shrinks. Then we turn over the page and we've got 8 notes, and we're going to have a look briefly at these 8 notes to get a flavour of them. Then I'll talk about the 8 notes. The examiner has nothing at all going on in 7 and 6, so they're a bit naff really, and that is quite commonplace to have these naff notes where nothing really goes on. So 7 and 6 we'll look at quickly, but nothing happens there. That's supposed to be a tick. It didn't really come out very well as a tick, did it? So try that again. How do I do a tick with this big thick thing? Like that? Oh, that looks like a tick. There you go. So the preference share dividends are always paid in full each year and included interest in the income statement. Of course, prefs themselves are debt, and the cost of debt is called interest, so that's fine. Part of the preference capital was deemed during the year. We knew that already. We've got the 30 on the CFS. The exchange differences included in the statement of changes in equity relate to the foreign associate, but we knew that already. There was a dividend from the associate during the year. Actually, we can probably get away with closing that out now. So the examiner's saying, oh, well, there's a dividend from the associate. Okay, let's close that. Go on then. So that is associate dividend received. Pick up my 25-year-old Casio calculator. So 5 plus 98 minus 13 gives us 90. So the associate dividend received, as you've probably heard, associates are often referred to as investment in associate, telling us where this should go on the CFS. There you go. And we've dealt with paragraph 7 and 6. And we're going to go back to the story. And this idea of starting at the back is indeed what you do in the real examination. But what I promised to do was to talk about your exam in December 2015. What is the difference between this question and the question that's waiting for you in December? The answer is not much in theory, but in practice quite a big difference. Your question will be exactly like this, just twice as big. Now the P&L and balance sheet won't be twice as big. What will be twice as big is the notes, where you have just, should we change scale on this one as well? Play with the scale. I seem to like playing with the scale today, don't I? Where you have just one page, it's still fairly intimidating, isn't it? Where you have just one page currently over my shoulder, you will have 2 pages of supplementary notes waiting for you in December, and that is the difference between a question, from 2015 and a question from 10 years ago. Otherwise the questions are exactly the same. They're not more difficult, they're just more. But when they're more difficult, right? Because there's more to do in the same time. But fundamentally they're exactly the same. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work our way through the other paragraphs. We've done 7 and 6, and the next paragraph we're going to do, which I think I'll highlight in green actually, is this one here, paragraph 4. Is that the one I want to do? It is the one I want to do. So what we're going to do is tick through that data now. So I suppose I'll go in there so I can tick it. So getting in there and ticking it, I'm just going to tick it, the information. I'm just going to go 913, 1003, 9, 6, 202, 222. That's it. I'm just going to tick through the data like that. That's all. Till it's done. Right. So what was the story again? I used to have trade payables of 913, so that goes in here, 913. I used to have trade payables of 913, and now I have 1003. Can you see where that's going in just there? Great. And you just learn where this stuff goes. Next is the interest accrual, which goes down here. I used to have 9, and now I have 6, and if I add across I get 48, and there's 2 marks for the 48. Great, there's another 2 marks. And then the tax goes into the tax working. I used to have current tax of 202, I now have current tax of 222, opening roll, closing sausage. I'm just looking for another nice easy list of numbers to copy. So back into the question. I'll just give that a tick, I think. So is that going to go? No, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is this. There we go. And I'll give... It's a bit hard to see what I'm ticking here, actually. What I'm ticking is... Paragraph 4. Just be warned, I haven't done paragraph 5 yet. Still outstanding. It's a bit gross, that pink, isn't it? So what I want to do next is these 2 numbers here. So let's go and have a look at those 2 numbers here. Right. So the tangible non-current asset movement for the period including the following amounts of net book value. The examiner says, would you like to copy depreciation? And we go, yes, please. And he says, there's a mark for your copying. So we go 51. And what we do is we add it back to remove its effect. We're going to, that's basically the idea of the whole of this thing called the operating profit reconciliation. This fella here. Pink again. That thing there is called the operating profit reconciliation. The whole idea is basically we're adding back costs that are not cash flows, is essentially the idea. But hang on a second, wait a second. Because we've practiced questions like this before, because we've practiced this question over and over again, we learn that the depreciation also makes tangibles go down. Makes them go down, so we stick a sausage around that. And speaking of sausages, disposal. Wow, look at that sausage. Yes, of course, when the disposal happens, cash flows in, but at the same time, property, plant and equipment plant walks out of the factory. The tangible non-current asset movement for the period including the following amounts at net book value. That 40 is the net book value walking out of the tangible working. So it's got a sausage around it, the tangibles are walking out. But if we read the bottom line, it says the disposal resulted in a profit on disposal of 7. Woo! But 40 plus 7 gives us disposal proceeds of 47. So PPE, disposal, or whatever you want to call it, is 40 plus 7 gives 47. But read right to the end of the line on that sentence. In fact, I'll highlight it actually, it's so dodgy. The bit I'm referring to here is included in cost of sales. Ugh. Mix of pink and orange. Well, I'm struggling with my colours now. Pink and orange is horrible, isn't it? But I'll just remove those two and play with that idea on the CFS. You see, clearly the profit on disposal is fairly obviously included in this 47. It's the 7 in the 47, but we're also told it's in the 790. If the same 7 is included in both of those fellas, then the same profit is in the same cash flow statement twice, which is duplication. So the purpose of this area here is to pull out the profit on disposal, which is tricky, isn't it? So it's not quite what it seems to be doing. Not quite what it seems to be doing. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the profit on disposal. Now when you take this home at the weekend, you might think to yourself, hang on, I thought this profit on disposal was a profit. Why is it? It is a profit. The reason that that 7 is in a bracket is because I'm pulling it out. It is a profit and I'm pulling it out using this sausage, using the brackets. Okay? And that's another mark. And takes us up to another list of ticky-tickiness. Let's go back to the question. So I can tick that off, or I have ticked that off. So I can tick this off, there we go. That's what I want to do. Tick off number 3, which is in the bag now. And again, perhaps I'll use this disgusting pink to highlight the fact we haven't done number 2 yet, but I'm going to go and do number 1. I might even give it a tick ahead of the grade. What we're going to do is we're going to tick our way through these fellas here, just like this. But not quite in that order, a bit more subtle than that. But we are going to start with the 172. So when a sub walks in, Ducky acquired a 90% holding in Prince during the year. The fair values of the assets of Prince at that day were as follows. When a sub walks in with tangible non-current assets walk in. That's the idea there. So we'll tick that fella off and then we'll stick it in our answer. So there we go. So what am I doing here? So that's sub-acquisition. Well, we definitely did this one last week actually. When a sub walks in with tangibles, tangibles walk in and therefore tangibles go up. Okay? And it's the same kind of idea for the 33, 27 and 22. Except we already have the arithmetic sorted for us. All we need to do is just copy 33, 27 and 22. And then we add across using a formula called trust, trust, reverse. Trust, trust, reverse. And let me show you how that works by using my trusty Casio calculator. 622 minus 734 plus 33 gives minus 79. So we trust the number and the sign. 601 minus 689 plus 27 gives us minus 61. And 913 minus 1003 plus 22 gives us, almost copied that then, gives us minus 68 in the dial, but then we reverse the sign for it to become plus. So you trust the sign, then you reverse the sign. TTR, you trust, trust, reverse. It's a really nice way of getting the marks here. And how many marks are there? Well, every time that this has been examined, it's been given a whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 marks. Whoa! Every time except last time, unfortunately. That's your examiner for you. His only consistency is his inconsistency. But even so, it was still given 3 marks, 1 mark each, which is all right, isn't it? I mean, it's not as good as 6, but it's still good. So yes, probably 3 marks in December. Great, but hang on, we've forgotten about the cash. How can we forget about cash of 3 million walking in? Good point, good point. So we've got the 33, got the 27, got the 22, but now we need that 3 there. So I'll just give that a tick and I'll drop it in to the investing. The idea is quite simple. As a sub walks in with cash, cash walks in. So that's called cash in hand. 3, and 3 million in cash is walking in. And then we go back to the question, and the 13 was easy in the classroom but quite hard in the exam. If a sub walks in with stock, stock walks in. If a sub walks in with payables, payables walks in. And if a sub walks in with a tax liability walks in, and the group owes more money to the taxman. That's that idea, which is quite easy in the classroom, not so easy in the exam. So we then have a sub acquisition of 13. When a sub walks in with a tax liability walks in and makes the tax liability go up, so it's positive in the tax working. That's the end of the tax working, and that gives us a cash flow, which is the tax paid. So we're going to work that out now. So that's 202 minus 222 plus 417 minus 390 plus 2213 plus 13 gives 233. And that's a fairly typical tax working. There's usually 7 or 8 lines in a tax working, by far the most complex. But yeah, I mean that is still current exam standard for tax. So there we go, let's drop that into the CFS, not into the question, into the CFS. There's a sausage already waiting for the tax paid, so we go 2, 3, 3, like that, looking good. Looking good, and there's 3 marks for tax, as I mentioned. But back into the question, of course, you can't buy a sub without spending some money. So continuing with paragraph 1, the purchase consideration was 204 million and comprised 20 million ordinary shares of $1 in Ducky, valued at 4, and the remainder in cash. Now that headline word, cash, is exactly the word that you look for over and over again. Can you see that word cash? That's what you're looking for. And in your exam that's waiting for you in December, what you'll do is you'll basically, you'll have 2 huge pages of loads of information, and you'll just hunt around for the word cash, and any cash that flows, you stick it on your cash flow statement. So that is what we're going to do here. The purchase consideration was 204 and comprised of shares and cash. So it's partly shares and partly cash. Now, as you can see, the shares are 20 million in number, valued at $4 each, and $4 multiplied by 20 million gives us 80 million. So 80 million is the total of shares, 204 is the total of the total, and therefore 204 minus 80 gives us 124 for the cash consideration. Again, just 1 mark. It is just 1 mark, but it's a good mark. Sub acquisition consideration. I'm not sure I have enough space for the whole word, so I'll skip the whole word. It's 204 minus 4 times 20. 4 times 20 is 80. 80 from 204 is 124. And the cash flowed out as the sub flowed in. There we go, another 1 mark. And let's see what else it says. The purchase consideration was 204 million and comprised of 20 million ordinary shares of $1 in Ducky, valued at 4 each, and the remainder in cash. An impairment loss has been recognised on the goodwill arising on another previously acquired wholly owned subsidiary acquisition and is included in cost of sales. It is the group's policy to value the NCI at fair value, which at acquisition is 22. When a sub walks in with PPE, PPE walks in. When a sub walks in with NCI, NCI walks in. So we have sub acquisition and NCI, and we have 22 walking in to NCI. And we add down for another cash flow, it's the NCI div paid. How on earth do I know that? I'm cheating, of course. I've done this question before and I've done lots of them like it. That's how you learn this stuff, by doing them. And always the thing that comes out of the NCI is the NCI dividend paid. You just get used to it. So it's 107, no, that's not quite right. 107 minus 157 plus 69 plus 22 gives us 41. That's the NCI dividend paid to the NCI shareholders. So that goes into financing and is 2 marks usually. NCI dividend paid is 41 and the cash is flowing out to the NCI. Oh, wait a second. Wasn't there something about goodwill? Ooh, yes. So clearly when a sub walks in with goodwill, goodwill walks in. So here's our goodwill working. But a goodwill working is far less formal here on the cash flow statement than it is in a balance sheet question. You know, it's just consideration plus NCI minus net assets. It's the same 3 figures being brought together, but as you can see on a cash flow statement, the working is on a line, not in a column, but on a line, much less formal. So the consideration was 204, the NCI was 22, and the net assets, I don't think I've pointed that figure out to you yet. So the net assets is given in the question and is this figure of 200 there. Okay. So 200. 200. What sort of pen have I got? A red? No, black. 200 gives me 26. When a sub walks in with goodwill, goodwill walks in. Now that is the impairment in goodwill. And before we go any further, I just want to add down 92 minus 78 plus 26 gives us 40. And then I want to reinforce this. How's that going to work for me? I'm going to just change scale slightly. Can you see that? Actually, let's do tangibles. The figure coming out of tangibles is always the figure for purchases. So 1248 minus 2473 plus 80 minus 51 minus 40 plus 172 gives us minus 1064. Minus 1064. And of course that cash outflow goes to the cash flow statement. Up it goes to the cash flow statement. We have PPE purchases. PPE purchases of 1064 flowing out. Okay, and that's usually 2 marks, sometimes 3, but usually 2 marks for that one. But what I was going to say was to do with the workings. We've worked out the impairment of goodwill, but I haven't done anything with it. And the reason for that is I haven't quite finished with these workings here. I wanted to reinforce an idea, and I can really do that now because of the language that I've used. You can very clearly see that the product of the NCI is a cash flow of 41, and the product of the tangible is a cash flow of 1064, and the product of the tax is a cash flow of 233. And these are all giving cash flows except one. The product of goodwill working is an impairment of 40. And again, you just have to learn that this working, although it's labelled a cash flow working, actually does not give a cash flow. You have to learn that the product of this is the impairment in goodwill. So we have learnt it, and we'll now stick that on the CFS and earn ourselves another mark. Now what we do with this is the same as we have done with depreciation. How much cash flows when you charge depreciation? None, so you add it back to remove its effect. How much cash flows when we charge charge and impairment, none, so we add back to remove its effect, which means we're going to add back that 41 like that. There we go. Good. And I think I'll go in there now so that I've got a nice big scale. Fantastic. And then, you know, this question then just goes off like a rocket. We've got a couple of really tricky things right at the end, and there is always tricky stuff right at the end. In fact, I have highlighted, as you can see, the rather gruesome pink around paragraph 2, but it's actually paragraph 5 I'm going to start with, also in gruesome pink. So I'll just get rid of that horrible pink if I can. There we go. And I'll give it a tick now, give it a positive tick in orange. Yep, there you go. The increase in the loans during the year was related to the issue of loan stock, partly for cash and partly to finance the purchase of raw materials valued at 70. What the examiner's just told you is that you've made a mistake. And it's a real prize winner point, and very, very few students got this in the exam. But what he's just told you is that you thought that the loan issue was 435, and you were right. But you also thought that the cash flow from the loan issue was 435, and you were wrong. It isn't. What flowed in when the loan stock flowed out was cash and materials. Materials is not cash, and when materials flow, it isn't cash flow. So if the 435 is 435 but includes 70 that's not cash, how much is cash? 365. 365. And you do a little minus 70 and make reference to paragraph 5. Now that's really difficult, but the way that the marking guide works is there is 1 mark for the 435 and 1 more mark for the 365 above. And ideally, I haven't made a fantastic job of this, but ideally the 435 is just visible underneath, because there is one mark for each. First of all, 1 mark for putting it in, and then 1 more mark for changing it. So that 1 mark for moving the 435 to 365 is very difficult, but in fact is not the hardest part of paragraph 5. The super rocket science in paragraph 5 I'll do in red on the left here. It is the materials for debt. And it's going to look even more horrible when I highlight it in green. And I'm going to highlight it in green because I'm reinforcing this idea in depreciation. What do we do with depreciation? We add it back to remove its effect. What do we do with the impairment? We add it back to remove its effect. Why do we do that? Because both of those are costs, they are charges, but there's a 0 cash flow. And the same is true for the materials for debt. Materials usually are a cash flow. But these materials were flowed in as the debt flowed out and no cash flowed out. So they are a cost in cost of sales for which there is no cash flow. They are a 0 cash flow cost, so we need to add them back to remove their effect because they have the same basis as depreciation. Wow! And the number of students who got that right in 2000 when this was examined was, of course, 0. And it's a similar idea with the final paragraph, which is paragraph 2, which is super duper rocket science. So paragraph 2, let's just tick it off, get rid of that yucky green. I'm going to actually change the scale, you'll see why in a second. I'm going to get rid of the yucky green. How do I do that with a rubber? There we go, pa-cha. And give it a tick. Ooh-cha. The remainder of the shares issued during the year were issued for, whoa! Cash. We love that word cash. Oh, we love it. But what's this word remainder? What are you talking about, Graham? I thought the shares were issued for cash. Ah, He's telling us that the share issue figure that we have on the cash flow statement is correct, but the cash flow that we have assumed is wrong. We thought the cash flow is 150 and it's not. Now, is there a cash flow in paragraph 2? Yes. Is there a share issue in paragraph 2? Yes. Is there a share issue in paragraph 2? Yes. Is there a share issue in paragraph 1? Oh yes. If there's a share issue in paragraph 1 and a share issue in paragraph 2, how many paragraphs are there in paragraph 1 and 2? There are 2 paragraphs in paragraphs 1 and 2. So how many share issues are there? 2. 1 in paragraph 1 and 1 in paragraph 2. What did we assume? That there was 1 share issue. And we were wrong. But we weren't stupid. Share issues are very rare. And when they happen, they usually only happen once in a year. And they're usually for cash. But this is not the usual story. This is different. We know that the share issue in paragraph 1 was in order to purchase a sub. We can tell because it says. And of course we know that the share issue in paragraph 2 is for cash. We know because it says. So we know one of these share issues is a non-cash flow issue. And we know the other one is a cash flow issue. But we also know the $4 in paragraph 1. We know the $4 in paragraph 1. We know the $4 and the 20 million. So we know the fair value of the non-cash flow issue, so we can work out the fair value of the cash flow issue. Wow, that is so hard. And of course the number of students getting that right was absolutely 0, because in order to score the marks here, you need to bring together paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Do excuse me leaning forward in a rather ridiculous way, but the studio lights are just right on top of that. Maybe I should just move the studio lights. So minus 7, what did I say there? Minus 80, oh goodness, I don't want to get that wrong. So what was the consideration in paragraph 1? 80. Was it a cash flow issue? No, it was to purchase a sub. So how many issues were there? 2. And both of them are in the 150. If you have 150 apples, of which 80 are green and the rest are red, how many red apples do you have? The answer is 70. If you have 2 share issues, the total of which is 150, of which 80 is non-cash and the rest is cash, how much is cash? 70. 1 more mark for that. And of course the number of students getting that was 0. And that would score you a full 35 out of 35. In the exam you add across but not down. You add across but not down on the balance sheet. You add across but not down on the P&L. And you add across but not down on the cash flow statement in the exam. But of course I want to check that I haven't, sold you any dummies, made any daft mistakes. So I am going to add down. Starting on the left here in green, it's going to look pretty disgusting, I think. Green and pink. Actually, it doesn't look as bad as I thought it would. And we're going to work down for the CGFO on the trusty old Casio calculator. 790 minus 79 minus 61 plus 68 plus 51 minus 7 plus 41 plus 70 equals 873. I think that sounds familiar. 873. You'd think I'd know these numbers by now, but I don't know that one. And then we just go a little bit further. Green will probably look okay. Green, can't even say my colours anymore. Yellow will look okay. 873 minus 48 minus 233 gives 592. I thought it was 591. Do you know, I think I made a mistake. Probably my calculator finger slipped. That would be the most likely for me. 790 minus 79 minus 61 plus 68 plus 51 minus 7 plus 41 for impairment. Was it 41 for impairment? Ah, so I'd have lost my impairment mark. Can you see that? I'm cheating, you see, because I've done this question before, and thank goodness I have, because can you see what's happened here? Or, you know, it's impossible to get absolutely everything right in the examination. It's hard enough in the classroom where I am. That's 40, isn't it? And when you make a little mistake like that, when you're copying across, trouble emerges. So that 41 should be 40. Sorry about that, guys. And I've lost where I am. So that's plus 40, I think I'm on. Plus 40 and plus 70 gives 872. How do I do this then? I'm quite sure how to do this. There you go. 872 and 40. Yeah, that worked quite well. And then minus 48 minus 233 equals 591. I am definitely cheating here because that does sound familiar, I have to say. So there's my yellow. And then we repeat the 591 at the top. I'm glad I did this, because that would have been confusing if you took the wrong numbers home. 591, and then I work all the way down and try and get minus 148, I think it says at the bottom there. 148, yeah. So what have we got here? 591, so 591 plus 23 plus 90 plus 47 plus 3 minus 124 minus 1064 plus 70 minus 30 plus 365 minus 78 minus 41 equals, yay, 148. And the cash flow statement balances. What's the chances of that happening in the exam? Absolute zero. But it did in the classroom. There you go. What a wonderful question. As mentioned earlier, there are 2 questions that you need to practice to get your knowledge and your confidence up. The 2 questions are this one, Ducky, that we've just done together, and the other one's Squire, that's down in the library, pre-recorded to the library. Both brilliant questions. Squire's a little bit more junior, but still a fantastic question. And they are real exam questions, but they are of an intermediate standard, whereas the examiner's standard has gone, has gone off like a rocket now. So we'll be doing we'll do the most recent actually, cash flow statement from 2013, and we'll make sure that on revision we're doing the real deal. And you'll see that it is very, very like this question, just bigger with more craziness. Great, I can see there's a little bit of chat up there. I'll see if I can help. Believe it or not, that was super slow. I was probably about 25 minutes behind exam pace. So, yep, look at this recording again at the weekend and make sure you build up your speed. What you're looking for really, if I'm honest with you, what you're looking for is pre-revision to be able to do this question in half an hour. If it takes longer than half an hour, you're probably too slow, to be honest. So more practice required there. Is it likely to be examined in December? Of course, that's why we're looking at it. Impairment was 40, not 41. Could you come again on the impairment? I did not completely get it. The idea of adding it back, you mean? It might be that just simply that I got the figure wrong, or it might be just the way things go. What I was saying in yellow and green is that generally in yellow, when you're doing your workings, you're doing cash flow workings, and the product of the cash flow working is the cash flow. And what you have to learn is, when you're doing these questions, is what the product is. So the product of the NCI is the NCI dividend paid. And how do I know that? Because I've done the question before. How are you going to learn it? By doing the question over again. And then what's going to come in the exam, it's going to be NCI dividend paid. How will you know that? Because you've done this question and other questions like it before, like Squire. They're just really repetitive. Really repetitive. I suspect that probably shows that you didn't do the question Squire as your homework as requested when we were together last week. But go back, do your question Squire, and then do this question and go and do Squire, then do Squire, and then do this question, and do this question and do Squire, and repeat it over and over and over and over and over again until you know what happens in each of these workings. But what I'm saying here is that in yellow, the product of all three of those fellas is always the cash flow, but the product of the goodwill working is always the impairment, not a cash flow. And that is, again, something that you learn. What is the product of the goodwill working? The impairment. Why is it like that? Like that? Because it always is. What always? Always. Always, 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 always. How do you know that? Because you've done this question over and over again until you learn it like an animal. There is a hint in the question. Did you notice when you go into paragraph 1, the examiner repeats the word impairment twice? So he gives you a hint that the green fella is an impairment, but unless you can take the hint, then it's going to be meaningless. You know, goodwill working always gives the impairment. And then maybe it was the other bit about the impairment that bothered you. The idea of all four of these, actually. It's not completely obvious with all four, but I'll certainly say all three of these, and then I'll point at them. All three of these is you're adding them back to remove their effect. And what you'll find in your exam is you have another charge and you add it back to remove its effect. Then you have another charge and you add it back to remove its effect. That's what you do with charges. You add them back to remove their effect, because charges are only charges and not cash flows. And what we want is cash generated from operations. And what we're starting with is profit. So to get cash from the profit, we have to add back the things that aren't cash. The costs that aren't cash, we add them back to remove their effect. Okay? That's that idea. Which is exactly the same in Squire. So when you do have a look at Squire, you'll find that you know, you're reinforcing that. Oh, very good. Very good, Bagingo. Bagingo has answered that beautifully. Really good. Well done, guys. You survived. And as I say, believe it or not, that was really slow. You obviously didn't realise, but that was really slow, an awful lot slower than I usually go. So, yes, welcome to P2. So, because I've gone a little bit slower than usual, believe it or not, because I've gone a little bit slower than usual, we have a little bit less time on current issues, but it can't be helped. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to squeeze on this middle sandwich, on the filling. I'm going to give you a full filling, plenty of jam. And the jam in the jam sandwich is talking about the examination. So let's do that now. So fresh new, brand new page. Let's talk about the examination. Okay. There we go. Lovely. Fresh new, brand new page, and I'll just go like that. There we are. Excellent. So how does the exam work? P2 exam. P2 exam is made up of two sections. Section A with a compulsory case study. And I said I was going to move that light, didn't I? Because it's really, really annoying. Just move it probably a little bit and it'll do the trick. Just give me a second. Just going to get that fella just so it doesn't completely blind my screen. Oh, that's so much better. Why didn't I do that earlier? How do I look? I look exactly the same, don't I? Don't know why that screen's just happened to be just there, right on top of my screen. Must have just been someone knocked it or something. So section A is the compulsory case study. Oh, that's better. Oh, goodness me. My eyes, I don't know, probably this recording is going to look like I've got a headache or something because it's just been squeeging my eyes. 1A, 35 marks of numbers in what is usually referred to as the groups question. What does a groups question look like? It looks like Ducky. Ducky is the 35 marks from an exam question a while back. What does it look like? It looks like Ronette. Guys, if you haven't practiced Squire, you probably haven't practiced Ronette. Make sure you go back and do Ronette. It is the gel between the knowledge and the examination. You need to make sure you're doing your homework questions, otherwise you'll be in deep trouble when you get to revision. So what does a balance sheet question look like? It looks like Ronette, your homework question. What does a cash flow statement look like? A cash flow statement question looks like Ducky, it looks like Squire. But there are 3 different forms of this question, of course. There is, I'll use a bit of colour here, I think. There is P&L, there is balance sheet, and there is CFS. And I believe I have said this previously. It's either P&L or balance sheet or cash flow statement, and now I'll say it a slightly different way. It's either cash flow statement or P&L or balance sheet. It won't be P&L and balance sheet, it'll be one or the other, but it won't be both. But both P&L and balance sheet are done in the same way. The way that we do a P&L, the way that we do a balance sheet is called consolidation. So we go net assets, goodwill, and then we add across. So every time you practice a P&L, you're practicing a balance sheet. Every time you practice a balance sheet, you're practicing a P&L because they use the same process. They do feel slightly different, but they are very, very similar, technically at least. But a cash flow statement, you've just done one. It's a completely different kettle of fish, to use that rather strange English expression. So a cash flow statement is an on-off switch. Either it comes up, in which case, if you haven't done it, you might as well spend the next 3 hours in the toilet, because that's where your exam is going. If you can't do a cash flow statement and it comes up, it's game over. But on the other hand, if you really can do a cash flow statement and it doesn't come up, then you have totally wasted your time doing the cash flow statement and practicing it. It's very, very frustrating. I sometimes like to say this, I'm not sure if I should be saying it, but if I was the examiner, then I would be examining the cash flow statement in the B section. If there's consolidated P&L on the A section, I'd have maybe a bit of cash flow statement in the B section. I think I'd just examine these things more frequently and move them about a bit more. But know your examiner's on-off switch. Either it comes up 35 marks, or it doesn't come up at all. So what is the chances of it coming up? Well, it was a P&L in the last exam. And the examiner's not over fond of P&Ls, but he is over fond of catching students out. He loves to try and do it. So there's a good chance of a repetition. A good chance as in a low chance, but a chance of a repetition from September to December. And then basically, as it works with the other 80%, I'm just going half and half. I can't tell how to play this at all. Almost always, after every P&L, the examiner has had a cash flow. But then the examiner likes to catch students out. So he might have noticed his own trend and therefore want to break it and therefore have a balance sheet. You can say it's... But the story is, if you can't do one of these fellas, that's the one that'll come up. So unfortunately on revision, we only actually get to do 2. question ones, which is a great shame. It's just the way it is, you know. There's only so much time that we have together. So we're going to do a cash flow statement as promised. We're going to do a balance sheet as promised, but I'll have to put the P&L question into homework. It's a lovely question called Marchant, and it's okay. It's all right. But I would love to do it with you, but then I'd love to do all the questions with you. But I can only do what I can only do in the time available. So I'll do a cash flow and I'll do a balance sheet with you on the revision course. And those are the percentages. So many of you are asking, is it likely to come up in December? The answer is definitely yes. Which brings us to the rest of the exam. In the remainder of the scenario, there are 15 marks on accounting and ethics, and particularly the marks on ethics, usually 7 marks on ethics, are the easiest in the entire exam. They're absolutely beautiful marks, really, really good. So, you know, especially when we get onto revision, I'm going to really encourage you to dedicate some time to that ethics. It's beautiful stuff. Then in section B, we have a choice of 2 from 3 of question 2, 3, 4 for 25 marks each. And it's all narrative. It's all narrative. She's a bit shocking, isn't it? So that will be the focus of the remainder of the course, starting now. And speaking of focus, I'm going to try and draw your attention to question 4 and sell it to you. Current issues is almost without fail the easiest question in the entire examination, easier than question 1, easier than a cash flow statement. It tends to score far higher than the rest of the examination. It tends that question, it's not always the case, but it usually is the case that question 4 is substantially easier than the rest of the exam, but it's also substantially different to the rest of the exam. It's a very strange subject matter. I guess that you were I don't know, but I guess that many of you guys out there were imagining we're going to do more and more complicated double entry as we work our way through our career in corporate reporting. It just isn't the case. The difference between the senior accountant and the financial controller is not more better double entry, it's more better narrative, it's more better ability to tell a story. It's storytelling that will help your career, and it's therefore storytelling the examiner deliberately examines at the back end of the exam. And if you are good at storytelling, you already have an advantage in question 4. If you're not good at storytelling, you still want to do question 4. Because almost certainly one of the questions, 2 or 3, will be an absolute nightmare, and you definitely don't want to be doing. You don't want to be forced to do an impossible question when there's an easy question you're scared of. So I'm going to do a little bit of salesmanship. I am already doing a little bit of salesmanship for current issues, and you're going to have to do a little bit of having a word with yourself and giving yourself a bit of a slap and saying, come on, I want you to concentrate on current issues and get better at it. You know you're not so good at storytelling. Let's see if you can improve over the next few weeks, because it isn't December yet and you do have time. So current issues, I'm starting it early to give you time to grow into it, because it's strange, as you will find. It's very far removed from your F7. It's much more like P1 and P3, which is only right and appropriate, because corporate reporting is politics. Corporate reporting is politics. But it is also accounting, and the examiner examines accounting and problem solving through 2 questions he calls the themed question and the mix question. and they just have a huge, I do apologise, the themed question and the industry question, my apologies. He calls them the themed question and the industry question, but together they're really just a pair of mixed questions, and they have a huge number of stuff going in it. So for example, one of those questions could have groups with control and influence and goodwill and fair value adjustments and policy changes and revenue recognition and leases and held for sale and discontinued operations and provisions and deferred tax. So 12 subjects in one question would not be unusual. And then the other half of the syllabus is in the other question. So question 2's got one half of the syllabus and question 3's got the other half. And it would not be unusual for that to be the case. And, you know, to be frank with you, probably whichever of them you choose, you'll find you're not choosing because you like it, you're choosing, you know, the least bad of 2 and 3. Hopefully by the time you get to December, you're positively choosing question 4 and then the least bad of question 2 and 3. Which brings me to strategy now. So the truth of the matter is, once you get into the examination, you will be able to do the balance sheet, the cash flow and the P&L, but you won't be able to do it in an hour, and you only have 35 marks, which means you only have an hour. So one way of stopping yourself of running over the time allocation is to do the exam backwards. So you go question 4, 3, question 1, C, B, A, and you do A in the last hour. And that really highlights how this examination works. It's essentially a narrative exam with 1 hour of numbers tagged on the end. And the dividing line between the two components of the exam is just there between the numbers and the narrative and the numbers. So it's a big growing up experience to get into corporate reporting. It's useful stuff, but it's probably a little bit strange if you were expecting, I don't know why I'm doing that horrible pink like that, but I seem to have just done it, so I'll go with it. So it is a useful experience if you are, you know, thinking that you're going to make great steps in your career by getting better and better at double entry. Then that's true, but you'll hit a glass ceiling and it won't be too long before you'll never be able to get through it unless you get into politics, which is the back end, the narrative component, and talking things through. You know, that's where the money is. That's where the money is. Great. Okay, so how am I doing for time? Sort of squeezed, if I'm honest with you. Yes, I think I'll leave it there. I'll have a quick look at the chat, see how we're doing. Someone's asking the question as to how to lay out the cash flow statement. There is malleability in the way that you lay out your pro forma, but I wouldn't suggest you use it. Decide how you are going to lay out your pro forma and then do it, and never, ever, ever change. Otherwise you'll be thinking about the format in the exam. And you know, I've already talked about the hour just going like that. If you spend time worrying about the format, oh no. So do whatever works best for you, Jack. But I would do the format like I did it, because that's the one that the examiner's expecting. But you know, IS 7 is an old IES and it has malleability, and if you have a certain way that you like to do your cash flow statement and it's going to help you to speed up, then you please do it. The lecture notes in chapter 14, UK corporate reporting, is for the UK exam only. Absolutely right. So you guys are doing international. Make sure you check your examination kit. Make sure you check your examination application. Make sure that you're going to be sitting the international examination when you get to your exam hall, because the UK examination is substantially harder. It involves, well, a huge amount of learning. It really does. It's extraordinary the amount of examinable stuff that is in the periphery of P2 UK. Absolutely ginormous syllabus. You know, theoretically it's how many times bigger? while, you know, different ways of working out the ratio, but 5 times bigger. Good, good, everyone's sorted. Right, okay, 20 minutes, let's go for current issues. Off we go. So, current issues. Current issues. These are essentially the examiner's articles. But the examiner doesn't write articles for P2. He writes for qualified accountants in a section of the ACCA website known as CPD, which is Continuing Professional Development. Once you get your P2 and then you get your P7 and you've passed the exams, you become what's called an affiliate. And then once you have done your 3 years of experience, you become a member, and then your education continues. You might choose to specialise in tax. You might choose to specialise in management, but you might choose to specialise in corporate reporting, in which case what you'll be doing is you'll be reading Graham's articles monthly. That's right, he writes 1 article a month and has been doing so for the last 20 years. So there's an awful lot of articles out there. But the articles which are not written for us as students of P2 are then twisted and pulled around and put into a P2 formula, and then they are examined in P2. And by going through the list of articles and using a little bit of educated guesswork, I have a list of usually 5 I go for, but I'm going to go for 6 this time, as follows. So the number 1 is revenue. Ooh, which we're looking at again tomorrow. Do you remember that? So there is P2 tonight, session 4, and session 5 is tomorrow. You might remember there was problems with the computer in this room. I'm in room 5. So in room 5 there was a crash a couple of weeks ago, I think it was now, and the makeup session is tomorrow. So if you are watching this recorded at the weekend, you've got 2 sessions to catch up with. Revenue is something we're studying in detail tomorrow, but we're going to introduce it now. 2 is financial asset impairment. Bad debts, that one is. 3 is equity accounting. Quite a hard one, that one. 4 is an absolute beauty. It'd be lovely if this one comes up. Change, or what the examiner is calling changes. 5, I'm struggling with the last 2. Leases and SMEs, because I can't tell which, it's kind of neck and neck, joint 5 and 6. But that's not just the list, that's the list in order of hotness, in order of tippability. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through briefly, just a couple of minutes each, talking about the content of those current issues. But before I do so, what I'd like you to do is to introduce you to your homework as regards current issues. Because current issues is a state of mind, and in order to get into the state of mind, you need to do some work. And the work that you need to do is read and do questions. Read is a bit of shock. You're going to need some knowledge. So the knowledge, it's a bit of a naff K, let me try harder with that K. The knowledge, there we go, that you're going to need to acquire are basically stories. You need the stories related to current issues. Now, in theory, you can look anywhere for this. There's plenty of it on the net. But because you're only just starting out in your studies and only just getting into the politics of corporate reporting, what I've done is I've collected some useful articles together for you. Those useful articles are compiled in Chapter 5, and I'll take you there now. They're on page 83, I think, if I remember correctly, from Tuesday, where we were here last. Indeed, they are on page 83. I'm just going to skip down to page 83. Probably page down is the way forward for me. Sorry about the jumpiness. It's a bit annoying, isn't it? But there we go. I can see my highlighting as well. Oh, there we go. Just bring. So there's the introductory page to the Ivory Tower articles. Now, the Ivory Tower articles are 250 words each. Each one of them just gives you one nugget of information about a single current issue. They're fairly low level of technicality, so they're just at your level, just at the, the baby steps level in terms of corporate reporting, and they'll start to draw you in to the idea that corporate reporting is in fact politics and not at all advanced double entry. So what I'm going to suggest to you is an ivory tower a day will keep Graham Holt away. Because it does not matter what gets examined this winter, the answer is IASB. It does not matter what gets examined this winter, the answer is IASB. But you can't say anything about the IASB if you don't know the IASB. It doesn't matter what comes up this winter, if it's revenue or financial asset impairment, or it is equity accounting. It doesn't matter what comes up, the answer is convergence, but you can't talk about convergence unless you know what convergence is. It doesn't matter what comes up, the answer is David Tweedy, but you can't talk about David Tweedy unless you know who he is. It doesn't matter what comes up, the answer is cohesiveness. Now, if the question is revenue, the question will be talking about revenue, so you need to know about revenue. But you're going to have 15 marks to talk about revenue. The first 7 will be talking about the technical content, which I'm going to teach you tomorrow in detail. But that's the first 7. The rest of it, the other 8 marks of the 15, will be talking about the politics of David Tweedy and cohesiveness and the ISB and convergence and all the rest of this stuff here. But you won't be able to do any storytelling unless you have some story to play with. Hence, you read an ivory tower a day to keep Graham Holt away. Which brings me back to my notes then. So we're going to say read ivory tower. Read ivory tower. On page 83. But storytelling is not just about knowledge. Storytelling is also about storytelling, the application. And storytelling is not a particularly easy thing to do if you're not used to telling stories and discussing things and talking around things and talking about politics. Then you'll need some practice. Well, that's okay, you've got plenty. You need to do questions, and you will be unsurprised to find I have a couple here for you. There are plenty more knocking about. Start with these 2. They are value and world. And they are on page 105 and page 106, particularly value is of most value. Beautiful questions because they have low technical content, and your exam, if it comes up, not your exam, if your exam comes up, when your exam comes up, you might have a question with fairly high technical content, like subject number 2, financial asset impairment, is fairly high technical content, but it might be near 0 technical content, just discussing change, which would be fantastic if you're a good storyteller, as long as you've got a bit of story to go with. So you need to practice your storytelling, because, you know, it's not just the, you know, discussing the technical content of these things that I'm going to talk through with you. It's being able to talk about politics and the scenario in front of you, and talk around ideas and respond to the examiner's words that he's used in his requirements and he's used in his scenario, and, you know, just talk around the things that he's suggesting. And the great thing about question 4s is almost any answer is a right answer. The only wrong answer is no answer at all, and that's what question 4s are like. It's like that a little bit in question 3 and question 2, but in question 4 it really is like that. It's, you know, you've got total freedom of expression. You can discuss anything you like. The examiner just says, there's 15 marks, just give me 15 points, as long as they're to do with this subject matter, I don't care. You can go where you like with this one. So, you know, you can talk about Walt Disney if you want to, you can talk about, you know, the internet, you can talk about Ed Sheeran and how he's fantastic at playing his guitar, as long as it's connected to the subject matter that's in the, you know, the story here. If you can connect Ed Sheeran to revenue, then you can talk about Ed Sheeran. You go for it, says Graham. And the truth is, I can connect Ed Sheeran with revenue, but then I'm cheating. I've practiced this storytelling for years and years and years. But you don't have years, but you do have a couple of months. So get into those questions. All right. So that's your homework. Wow, you've got quite a lot of homework now, because I suspect many of you haven't done Ronette. So you need to do Ronette to make sure you've got your basic consolidations all sorted and you brought them together in that wonderful question Ronette. It's in the video library. Then you need to do Squire. It's in the video library. That's the CFS that backs up with Ducky. Get your speed up with Ducky, so you can do these things at speed and you're not thinking so much, you just bash, 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 bash. And that's what you're going to need when you get into examination. You need to be going, oh, so fast, so fast, so fast. And speaking of the video library, of course you've guessed, these two questions, value and world, are in the video library. What I'd like you to do is you have a go at value and then look at me having a go at value. But if you're feeling a bit of a scaredy cat, look at me having a go at value and then you have a go yourselves. Whichever way round, it's in the library. Which leaves us with 6 minutes and 6 subjects, 1 minute each. Wow, that's going to be intense. So, here we go. The first project. 1. Revenue. There's a new IFRS. On revenue, called IFRS 15. There are no marks for IFRS numbers, but you will find you remember that one, which introduces a 5-step model, it's called. I wish it had been called a 5-step framework, but it's called a 5-step model, which is Cooper. First of all, you see if there's a contract. Then you identify the separate obligations under that contract. Then you find the one single price, and then you allocate the price to the obligations. And then you do revenue recognition at the end. And as I say, I'm going to talk to you more about that tomorrow. It's really good. But there used to be an IFRS, and what it used to do was just go straight in at revenue recognition. But the problem was, because it went straight in at revenue recognition, there was often inconsistency in revenue recognition. This is called a 5-step model, but it can rather nicely be described as being 4 steps before you're allowed to do revenue recognition. So you have to think through the contract, think through the obligations, think through the price, think through the allocation. Once you've done all that, then you can do your revenue recognition. And it really helps with the consistency of revenue recognition. And as I promised, more on that tomorrow. And it's a similar thing with the next one as well, financial asset impairment. You certainly haven't finished with this once you've done a minute with me. Financial asset impairment, or FA-IMP as it's usually known. There's a new IFRS on this. There is a new IFRS on this. But what is this? This thing, financial asset impairment, FA-IMP, is what you probably know as being bad debts allowance. So there's a new IFRS on bad debts. Again, the IFRS number doesn't matter, but it's IFRS 9. And it's really, really, really hard, and it is going to get examined. My intuition is it's going to be June 2016. But as you can see at number 2, it is hot for December 2015. I hope not for your sake, because it's really hard. With tricky language like, there is a new IFRS on bad debts, which uses an incurred, I'm not sure there's 2 R's, that's terrible, isn't it? I can't even remember how to spell incurred. My spelling is awful. I'm going to guess that there's 1. I am guessing. Incurred loss model. Of course, when you're using Word for Windows, you just use spell check, don't you? That's why I always was a bad speller, but I got worse since Word for Windows. There is a new IFRS on bad debts, which uses an incurred... Oh, I used it even wrong. Goodness me. It doesn't matter how to spell incurred, because that's not the model that's used. Sorry about that, guys. Easy for me to change because I've got my fancy computer. It's an expected loss model. My apologies. The incurred loss model is the old outgoing model. There is a new IFRS on bad debts which uses an expected credit loss model, and it's just like it sounds like. People are now encouraged, required to guess what losses they expect in the future with their healthy customers going bust. Ooh, that's really tricky. The idea is that this is more prudent. The idea is that this is more prudent. But there's no doubt about it, the increased guesswork is likely to increase creative accounting. But the increased guesswork is likely to increase creative accounting. Ooh, that sounds interesting, Martin. I'd like to know more about that. Well, of course, that's what the ivory tower is. So all of these are all in the ivory tower, along with other stuff as well that opens your horizons to all the current issues that are knocking about at the moment. And this one is particularly hot at the moment. You're studying this one again with me on the last evening. As it goes, it's the last evening, evening 8. But, you know, it's also in the ivory tower as well, particularly this component of the financial instruments project, massive project. Coming to the end now. How are we doing for time? We're just coming to the end. We're doing all right. Just give me another couple of minutes and I'll be sorted. Equity accounting. This is accounting for associates, and associates are carried using a formula, roll forward. An associate is measured at any point as being equal to the original acquisition cost plus the share of growth. Cost plus growth, that's the formula. And there's a nice way of analysing the equity accounting problem, and that is, the problem is, this is meaningless, which is pretty serious accusation to put as a form of accounting. All that cost plus growth tells you is cost plus growth. And perhaps the solution is not to use this, but to use a meaningful figure. The figure isn't perfect, but at least it's definitely meaningful. How about using fair value? Perhaps we should use fair value. So associates would be carried at fair value. That's it, no complication. No need to worry about the cost, no need to think about the growth, just fair value at the balance sheet date, straight from the market. Simple and useful. What a great idea. And that is proposed, and is the third on our tip list of Graham Hult's current issues. Coming in at number 4, oh beauty, I do hope this happens for you, is the wonderful subject of changes, or as everyone else knows it, change. First of all, FR is changing, corporate reporting is changing, financial reporting is changing in so many different ways, including there's a new standard on revenue, there is a new standard on financial asset impairment, and there are proposals for equity accounting. So you can use 1, 2 and 3 in number 4. That's the great idea. You see, you can just move your blocks around. You use the same knowledge for slightly different questions, just move things around. But what is the effect of change? This has these effects. We just write down the effects that change has on people. Well, it has the effect of stress and mistakes and the need for training and therefore the cost of training. Oh, and so many other things as well. And you can see that's a very, very low technical subject, which is hot. It is, I would suggest it's pretty much guaranteed to be examined in the next year. Whether it's coming up in December, I don't know, but you might get it. It would be lovely if you do. And then you've got 5 and 6. 5, quite nice. Leases. How should we say this? Let's just go straight for it. Problem. More on this, of course, when you study leases, but I want you to introduce you to the idea that, IFRS are less than perfect. This one is idiotic. The IFRS here, IS 17, is idiotic, because what you're required to do with an operating lease is ignore obligations you do have, which is just mad. It made sense perhaps in the 1980s when these ideas were developed, but it doesn't make any sense at all now. Operating lease accounting. Ignores real liabilities. So what's the solution? The obvious solution, stop doing operating lease accounting and have only finance lease accounting. Finance lease accounting. Finance lease accounting only. And that's going to happen. Did you know that? No, of course not. That's why, I'm introducing you to this. It's a simple idea. Operating lease accounting is idiotic, but you might not have thought of that before. Exactly. So you've kind of learnt these rules as rules rather than ideas that actually should have some substance. This one has no substance. It's based on substance but doesn't really work. And then SMEs is a real beauty. This usually is students' favourite, but unfortunately it's down at number 6. At the moment you're just starting with it, so you won't have an opinion, but in December it'll probably be your favourite. And probably the most, I'll start with the burden. The classic phrase is the burden. There is a new-ish IFRS for SMEs, is small and medium entities. For small and medium entities, that reduces the burden of FR, financial reporting, upon SMEs. And you can use the IFRS for SMEs if you're an SME. You can use the IFRS for SMEs if you're an SME. But what is surprising is the definition. Makes no reference to size at all. An SME is a non-publicly accountable, it's a horrible, horrible phrase, entity. Ugh, it's a disgusting phrase. Doesn't scan at all, does it? But that's what the IFRS says. An SME is a non-publicly accountable entity, meaning not this and not that. Not listed. Not quoted on a World Stock Exchange. Not finance. Not banking, not pensions, not brokering, not banking, not banking. Which means that, look at this, ASDA in the United Kingdom. That huge entity, ASDA, is an SME in the United Kingdom because it's not listed. It's 100% owned by Walmart. And it's not finance, it's a retailer. You might not know ASDA, but for those of you who do know ASDA, it'll be a bit of a shock that it fulfills the definition. You can see how the definition doesn't use size. So that's a nugget of information about SMEs. Oh, that's interesting. I want to know some more about SMEs. That's what the ivory tower is for. An ivory tower a day keeps Graham Holt away. Get into chapter 5 and you will find there's plenty in there to pull you out of the grime of double entry and into the dirty smog of corporate reporting, where frankly that's where the real money is to be made. If you are interested in accounting, the real money is to be made up there in corporate reporting, not down there in the FR. But yeah, it's up to you, of course. What we're thinking about is the examination, and question 4 is this fella over here. So let's get into it. Which brings me therefore to the end of this evening, and it is time for me to go to my slide. I'm going to bring it up just over our shoulder. Doodle-doo, there it is. I told you we were going to do cash flow statements and current issues, and we have indeed. You can see that there's a homework list there. Nothing is going to surprise you, we've discussed this already. Question Squire is the cash flow statement I've recommended. It's recorded down in the library. Value, it's the homework question I've recommended. It's down in the library. And the ivory tower is in chapter 5. It's those articles on page 83 onwards. Speaking about onwards, let's look onwards to what you should now be able to do. You should be able to have a go at a cash flow statement yourself. Well, you can. You can have a go at the 2 that I just discussed. You can have a go at Question Squire, and you can have another go at Ducky. And you should be able to start current issues by reading the articles and attempting the questions, the ones that I've just recommended to you. Which brings us to tomorrow, and we will be doing performance reporting and provisions. Doesn't that sound nice, guys? You will be in the world of proper FR, and you'll feel much more comfortable And of course, the reason I've introduced current issues early is to allow you to get comfortable with current issues, because it's not easy to start current issues in December. You need to start them now, and you are doing. Well done, guys. Thank you for your patience over this evening. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Have a super evening. What remains? See you tomorrow night.